Welcome to the Akashic Reading Podcast, presented by AkashicReading.com, the place where you can learn to access your soul's wisdom, or at least stop digging the hole any deeper. I'm your host, Terry Uktena, and today we'll be diving into how dreams, visions, journeys, and Akashic work are each ways of gaining wisdom which takes a bit of conscious effort and practice, but the results are worth it and can also be fun. One of the things which I find is often missing when people attempt to understand dreams, journeys, guided meditations, and Akashic work is the context. We're taught to think of dream meanings as a series of symbols, vignettes, or discrete messages which we need to figure out. Like holding a heart in your hand means to be more open-hearted, or falling from a height means loss of control. But often there's a framework of context surrounding and informing these experiences, which can move them from being simple but confusing into wisdom we can work with to guide or improve our lives. What do I mean by context? Well, the context of a dream, vision, or Akashic journey can be what you are or are not doing during it, or it could be the surroundings you're in, or a combination of both. If we go to the heart in your hands example, context would be looking at what the heart is made of and where you got it from. Are you in a hospital in scrubs having just removed this from a patient? From yourself? Are you in a field and you found this laying amongst the flowers and it's made of gemstone? Are you at a McDonald's in the airport and they gave you a heart rather than your McMuffin? Each of these examples carries the same symbol of a heart in your hands, but the gestalt of this with the context changes the meanings of each dramatically. A more common example of this is people who have experiences of flying. There's the feeling of freedom as, like Superman, you can go in any direction without fear of falling and see the bigger picture of everything around you. Or there's confusion because the reason for flying seems to be missing, or it seems like there should be a reason for why you're up there or where you're headed, but you don't know it. For some, the reason seems to be they're being shown something they can't see or understand if they're on the ground, like being given a guided tour by someone. All of these are examples of someone flying, but the motivations, or the why of it, change the meaning. And the context can help convert these into useful information. If the flying is about freedom, it can help to investigate what you are being freed from by looking back at where you started the flight or asking your companions what the purpose is. This could be a means of incorporating healing or personal empowerment into your physical nervous system to be used in your daily life or difficult situations. If you're flying and you don't know the destination, it can help to move the vision out of "this is happening" to "I am doing this" and start focusing on a point ahead of you or at the horizon. The shift will bring information which may unfold more of the plan or process. If you're being shown something or being given a guided tour, ask why you're being shown in such a disconnected, above-it way. This can prompt information to unfold, but also integration and interconnection with the guide and the process. There are also visions which are more about transitions and so incorporate planes and airports. Rarely do the actual flights get experienced, but either we arrive at an airport and become aware we need to get on a flight, or we find we've completed a flight and now have to navigate from the airport to the next destination. Air travel as swift and sudden transition from one situation to another is the common meaning of these types of vision experience. The context comes from either the departure or arrival setting. It's often important to note what people show up who in real life couldn't or wouldn't be there, such as a colleague who lives halfway across the world being the one who drops you off at the airport in your hometown, or you're being met by someone you haven't seen in decades. If after you arrive in the dream you immediately find yourself no longer in the airport, but in a different town or building or home, then the airport isn't necessarily relevant, but if you find yourself unable to get out of an airport, then the area it's in and the people around you most likely are a part of the point in the entire process. It's also good to notice if the people around you ignore you completely or are aware of you and how they choose to handle this. All of these things create a gestalt which can turn something which is odd and incomprehensible into useful message. Context is important to other forms of transition or travel as well, especially with walking or driving paths and roads. When I was first learning to understand my own Akashic experiences, one of the things which surprised me is how the principles of the physical world apply to things we experience in journeys or dreams. For example, a straight rod is very easy to work with, visualize, and understand, but to work with it requires we use our own energy to make it do or be something. It takes from us rather than giving. A rod which has been crafted into a spring or spiral already has energy stored in it via the new shape it's acquired. Squeeze it to put even more in and then let it go to see how it expends the energy. In Akashic work, straight line paths mean the work is done, things are complete, or there's nothing left here. We expend energy to travel them, and the road ahead is clear, which can be a blessing or boredom depending on the situation. A winding road is a means for us to acquire energy through the process and the experiences along the way. We may not be able to see what comes around the next bend, but each turn provides us with something more to help with our unfolding and becoming. Often the winding road is a means for situations, messages, or lessons to be presented. It's not unusual for people to come around a bend and see someone they know, but in a weird or very unorthodox setting. Stopping to interact with them, taking note of the entire situation, listening to what they have to say or refuse to say, can give crucial information to us about our relationship with them or a situation in real life which needs our attention. It could be that someone close to you shows up as camping in a small grassy area next to the path, but instead of an RV or a tent, they're living in a tiny home pulled by a turtle. In real life, you may experience them as giving and grounded, but how they experience the world is as a journey where they are keeping what they hold dear close to them, all gathered up like the turtle. They keep mobile in order to not be tied down with others' needs. Around the next bend could be a new boss who is surrounded by ultra-sleek objects and gadgets but is wearing rags or acting as if they're appropriately dressed when they're completely naked. They may present themselves as confident, competent, and the authority over their group, but it's smoke and mirrors, trying to hide their own issues and possible imposter syndrome. Another bend could bring you to a special place which you knew and visited during childhood but have since forgotten. Reconnecting with it now brings healing and new understanding to you about the past, but also about your nature and the possibilities ahead. While on a winding path, you can't see everything ahead or even very far, but each turn is giving you more, helping you to be more, and to understand the next steps on your journey. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention how context matters when it comes to visions and Akashic work around water. While there are many, many meanings to water and the various forms waters can take in a journey, being in, surrounded by, or covered in water is usually about emotions. One of the most common ways this shows up is someone swimming in water. Being in the water and having someone you love swimming away from you is usually talking about how you're growing or moving apart from each other. You swimming away from them often confirms the fact you're moving on in the relationship in some way. These usually occur in what appears to be a lake, bay, or calm ocean where there are no tides. If a tide or current is taking you from someone, this is context to pay attention to. Having a waterfall or an ocean wave fully engulf you is not injurious, but does talk to the amount and power of the emotions and emotional connection you're having. The setting this occurs in and what happens after are important to note as a means to start navigating yourself out of the deluge to firmer footing and a dry place to process. It's not uncommon for people who take up a spiritual path to find themselves having dreams of floating down a river or stream. Usually, this is a message they've heard time and time again. To trust, go with the flow, let things happen, relax and know it's all going to be all right. Rarely are these visions of straight lines or rivers with swift-moving water and rapids. Instead, they'll be winding and meandering, much like the winding path, and so we can know our energy is being restored, enhanced, and prepared for the next bend. It can very much help to pay attention to the setting in these situations. Is it fall with golden leaves? Are the banks on either side steep or shallow? Is the river going through dense wilderness or farmland? These details can give us a better understanding of the scope of the journey we're currently on and what we might need to do next. Concerning water dreams, there is one caveat I try to give to all my students. Most people have experienced, at one time or another, a dream so very vivid we can remember all the details, and it's filled with imagery which seems precise and meaningful, but yet is set incongruously in water. Such as being in a meeting with all the most influential people in the world, but the room is filled up to your knees with water. Or you're creating a meal to feed the poor while wading through San Francisco Bay. These are not dreams which have message or meaning, at least not much. These come usually in the morning, when our visions are still active, while at the same time our bodies are alerting us to the needs of our bladder. So, water or fluid is being mixed in too liberally with other things, and our mind is waking up, so processing more information, but not sorting correctly. These dreams are categorized as P-dreams, and while sometimes fantastical and entertaining, they don't usually have much of any wisdom to impart. In these cases, it's best to let the dream go, attend to your body's needs, and go on with your day. Dreams, visions, journeys, and Akashic work are each ways to gain insight into ourselves and the life we're living as spiritual beings in an interconnected world. Gaining wisdom from them takes a bit of conscious effort and practice, but the results are worth it and can also be fun. And that's all the time we have this week. If you're interested in knowing more, check out my website, akashicreading.com. Thank you to my patron of honor this week, Lourdes. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider supporting it by subscribing on Patreon. For just $5 a month, you can join in weekly patron-only classes, see all my other offerings, and get regular updates about what I'm working on at patreon.com/TerryUktana. Thanks. Bye.